Welcome to Clinic Success Secrets. Today it is my honor to have John-Marc Perro from Levers Health. John-Marc, apologies, is a creative healthcare business leader. Whose innovative approach to the healthcare sector, specifically, has Leb specialized in the field of peptides and regenerative practices in general. Uh, with a diverse background ranging from mechanical engineering to personal training. I think we're really going to get a lot from John's insights to running Levers Health, both from the actual the peptide side itself, and also sort of the business operations that goes on behind the scenes into you know in running a business that sells peptides in an age where it is still in that kind of gray area. So with that being said, John-Marc, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Tomas, great to be here, man. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me. Excited to dive in on kind of the medicine side, the sort of what's exciting in regenerative medicine, peptides. Also, the business side is also super exciting for me too. It's all really fun. So I'm excited to dive in.
Brilliant. So, John-Marc, before we get into this, maybe I'm missing out. I know for a fact I'm missing out on a few things. With regards to your background and how you got to where you are today with Levers Health, what was the journey and why peptides?
Yeah, good question. I've always known I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I've taken a stab at a few different businesses over the year. Some worked, some didn't. I lost all my life savings on one of them. But all of those lessons have kind of rolled into the next thing. And about a year and a half ago, I was getting ready to start a new business. And I was in this sort of ideation phase of what do I want to do and why do I want to do it and how should I go about this? And that timeline coincided with a personal injury journey where I've always struggled with chronic back pain. I think a lot of people do. But I have 2 herniated discs, constant inflammation, just constant pain. And then I also had a torn labrum in my hip, which I had surgery on, and it had flared up again. I actually tore it again. So I was going through this injury journey. At the same time, I was ideating business concepts. And that led me to a lot of rabbit holes and internet research and talking to doctors and looking at things like stem cells and PRP and exosomes and peptides and things like that. And I did find quite a wide spectrum of information out there. Like I would go to my doctor who worked on the LA Rams and the Dodgers, and he's like, stem cells are worthless, peptides are worthless. You need to go by the book. Just be grateful you don't have nerve pain and count your blessings and get out of here. And then you go on like the podcast circuit and the other side and kind of internet rabbit holes. And there's a lot of claims and, stem cells are amazing. I healed this. I did this. I did this. And so I was just really interested in finding that out for myself. So I went to a clinic in Mexico. I got some stem cells. I did a whole like stem cell spa week, a lot of treatments. And that just kind of like got the ball rolling for me on some of the regenerative medicine. I tried PRP. I stumbled across peptides after all of that and was like, oh, peptides like worked for me, like had a really good personal response with them. And I was like, wow, these are also pretty cheap. And so that just got me thinking about regenerative medicine as a whole. I was thinking that as I was thinking about business ideas, I was thinking, okay, maybe there's something with medical tourism. Maybe there's something with like a marketplace for some more of these like cutting edge therapies. And so I was ideating on that space, and I ended up building myself a rubric of like, what are the elements of a business that I want to, that I want to have, like a fast growing market, XYZ, ability to cash flow, ability to get an MVP out quickly. And when I thought about the space of peptides and regenerative medicine and sort of like offering this in maybe a telehealth format, it kind of checked all the boxes on my rubric. And so that's where I was like, oh, there's actually something here. And that was about a year ago, just a little bit more than a year ago. And that kind of set me on the path. I said, there's enough here to commit to this path and sort of figure it out along the way. I've always enjoyed health. I used to be a personal trainer. I grew up on green juice. I've really liked that, but I've never worked in health. And so that just set me down the journey. of starting Levers Health. And the idea for Levers was that peptides would be the wedge. Peptides would be the first batch of products because they're new, they're exciting, they work, they're really growing in popularity. There's a lot of buzz around them right now. They kind of hit this sweet spot of people are finding out about them, and they're working for a lot of people, but they're not fully accepted by the medical community yet. And so that was interesting. That sounded like opportunity to me. And so I found a partner, my partner Russ, who's a doctor. He's been using peptides, hormone therapy, and some sort of regenerative techniques for a number of years now. And we partnered up and we launched Levers last year. We launched in August. And then we've been figuring it out as we go. There's been some rule changes. We've really had to navigate the legal landscape, and we're trying to do that with trust and safety, and just making sure that we're following the rules and not putting anyone in harm, and also not putting the business in harm by doing anything illegal. So yeah, we've been figuring that out. There's been some twists and turns, but this year we've been growing fast. We added our first patient in October, and we have been really growing fast this year. Since December, this month in April, we've 10x'd. We're on track to 10x our revenue since December. We've added a few full-time employees, a few part-time employees. It's just been a lot. There's a lot of growing pains. We have probably 400 active patients right now. And managing that and customer service and keeping people happy and all that has been a journey. But it's been super fun, like really excited for where this goes. We have some exciting products and pipelines, or, exciting things on the horizon. But yeah, maybe that's a little, a long description there, but that's kind of how we got here.
No, it's a great description. I think it'd be important to dive into the actual peptide side of things itself. And then I might circle back and ask you about the steps and the hurdles and the barrier to entry really for getting into the space in the first place. But with that being said, peptides themselves, anyone that's listening that's a medical professional, they're very, very well acquainted with it. People like Andrew Huberman and so on have made it a bit more mainstream. But what's the short version of how would you explain what a peptide is to somebody without a medical background? And then what is the more scientific explanation or definition of them?
Certainly. So peptides have a lot of buzz, and you'll see it labeled on a lot of like face care products and things like that. A peptide is actually really simple in what it is, and it's just a broad classification of small molecules. Peptides are chains of amino acids. That's all they are. They're just short chains. So you have 21 amino acids total out there. Those make up the building blocks of peptides and proteins. Technically, by the FDA, the classification is a peptide is a chain of amino acids that is shorter than 40 amino acids long. Once it gets over 40 amino acids, it's technically classified as a protein. So basically, peptides are short proteins, and there's tons of them. And so that's why collagen is a peptide. There's all these peptides out there. They can act as hormones. They can act as signaling agents. They can act as many different They do a lot of different things in the body. It's a lot of cell regulation and cell signaling. And so there's actually, right now, there's over 7,000 peptides that we've found that we naturally produce in the body. And so that's a lot. That does a lot. There's about 100, some people say more, there's like 100 plus being investigated therapeutically for injury recovery, certain sort of modalities for inflammation or healing or something like that. But broadly speaking, peptides are just short chains of amino acids. They oftentimes act very specifically on cells. Because it's a smaller molecule, it has less things to bind to, and it binds very specifically to the receptor it's trying to bind to, versus with a protein, it's bigger, it can bind to more things, it can do more things. Some peptides act as hormones, Some peptides are more pleiotropic, meaning they're influencing a lot of different things in the body. And then some peptides are very specific in their action. But broadly speaking, yeah, it's just a classification of molecules. And I think it can get confusing that way because they can do so many different things. And so it is, when we're thinking about peptides and peptide therapies, it is important to be looking at the individual molecules and finding out what they actually do versus just calling them, oh, peptides do this, because it's super broad.
Okay. And then based on that, obviously, as you said, there's collagen, there's peptides that act similar to growth hormone, things like that. What are the specific benefits, and touch on the regulation side of things and legislation, and also the biological advantages of, say, perhaps using a peptide that is similar to growth hormone as opposed to HGH itself?
Yeah.
What are the pros and cons?
Good question. So, and it is important to note that most of these peptide therapies out there are all pretty new, and experimental. There haven't been a ton of human clinical studies on a lot of these. There's a lot of anecdotal data. There's a lot of doctors that have been using these for years with a ton of success. There's just not a ton of human trials. So it's important to just like put that asterisk that there's a lot of claims out there. There's a lot of people getting a ton of benefit with them, but they truly do need to be approached smartly and methodically, just to make sure that you're going about this in a safe way. But one application, you mentioned growth hormone, of why someone might supplement or treat themselves with a growth hormone supporting peptide. Well, growth hormone is really important for a number of factors in our body: bone density, muscle mass, fat loss, even some cognition things, your skin. It's growth hormone is a very pleiotropic chemical, and it's upstream of IGF-1, which also has that actually does a lot of the muscle building and fat loss actions of growth hormone. But as we age, our growth hormone levels decrease. I think it's about 15% per decade after 30. I'm not positive on that. So why might someone supplement with a growth hormone supporting peptide versus taking growth hormone as well, which is another thing is, if you take the peptide, it works a little bit more in your natural rhythms. And I'll explain that a little bit, versus if you take growth hormone, you're basically mainlining and constantly elevating your levels of growth hormone. So growth hormone is secreted from the pituitary gland, and it goes in pulses throughout the day. I think it's like between like 6 and 10 pulses throughout the day. And so you have a natural cycle of when it's released. The biggest pulse is during sleep. And it actually also, growth hormone influences stage 4 sleep. So it actually increases stage 4 sleep, which is good for basically repair and recovery of the body, kind of the physical system. So when you take a growth hormone supporting peptide, it acts on your pituitary to increase the amplitude and sometimes the number of pulses of growth hormone, which is more in line with your natural rhythms, but it also doesn't elevate it to super physiologic levels. So you're not 5xing your growth hormone. You might be like 1.3, 1.5xing your growth hormone from where you currently are, which is maybe taking it to a level that you were in your 20s or 30s. But you're not like mainlining growth hormone. One risk with taking growth hormone, and even some growth hormone peptides, is that you can saturate the cell receptor sites for growth hormone. And if you saturate that receptor site, it can no longer bind to growth hormone, and then growth hormone is less effective in the body. So when you take growth hormone, you're at a higher risk of that happening, versus if you take a peptide that's acting on your pituitary to secrete some growth hormone that's not elevating you to super physiologic levels, there's a much lower risk of saturation of those cell sites, but you still get all the benefits and downstream all the IGF-1 and everything like that associated with growth hormone. So why people would supplement with peptides, it's really cell regulation and trying to fine tune certain things that might get exposed to stress and damage and inflammation as we age. And so it's basically tweaking these little levers. It's the name of the company, levers. Is like you have these things that can move the needle on certain processes throughout the body. And peptides, when used smartly, can influence a lot of that. And then I said the other important thing is none of that matters if you don't have the foundation in place as well. So diet, exercise, sleep, All that foundational stuff, you have to have that before you really start making these fine-tune adjustments with some of the other things, because yeah, you have to have the foundation.
So, so yeah, if you're sleeping 3 hours a night, maybe get that.
Right. Yeah. All the growth hormone in the world is not going to help you.
Yeah, not sponsored. I'm not working out, but maybe invest in a whoop strap and supplement with some magnesium and start your sleep.
Right. Right. Yeah, I honestly think most health is really simple, and it really is the basics. It's kind of like an 80-20 thing of like, you have to have the foundational stuff in place. All those things: sleep, diet, exercise, sunlight, relationships, mindset, all that plays into the picture. And then once you have that foundation, you can start to optimize from there. And I think that's one big goal of our company, is helping people get that foundation first, such that, and that's education and resources, and pharmaceutical drugs and supplements absolutely play into that and help people in certain ways, but there has to be a big emphasis on the building blocks.
I was 2 points on this one. In terms of the point of, focusing on high leverage activities, leverage health, doing 80-20 and all that. It's a conversation I'd often have with my friends where, when it comes to even work-related stress or lethargy, and so on. First question: how was your sleep been? How have you been training? What's your diet like? As they'd say to me, or we'd say to each other. A lot of people in my network, no point wondering why you're wet if you're standing in water. Oh, no, right. Good one. I've no energy. I haven't slept in 2 weeks. I can't figure out what it is.
Right.
But I think you're touching on something really important, and this is a really important principle that a lot of guests that I'm chatting with they tend to be in agreement with, where, it's actually a conversation, something I was discussing with a friend of mine over dinner yesterday, who's a doctor. We're actually discussing the topic of semaglutide, Ozempic, any related peptides, where it is a subcomponent of a holistic strategy here. It is one tool in a toolkit. And if it is the catalyst that starts a positive domino effect where they start viewing themselves as, do you know what? I am a healthy person. I am somebody who invests in their lifestyle. It could be the leading domino to a much healthier lifestyle as a whole. So I think while it's not a one-size-fits-all cure-all, right, it's a great first step.
Right. That's such a good point. And that's one of our sort of theses as a company, is that you have to approach health from both sides. You have to do the prevention. You have to fix the lifestyle. You have to fix the sleep, all the diet, the nutrition. Like, the grocery store is poison, right? If you walk in there. But at the same time, you have to give people solutions that work and meet them where they're at today. And there's a lot of criticism for GLP-1s out there where it's like, you don't need this. You could just, eat better and exercise and do things like that. Those people that say that have not lived the life that some of these people are living, and they don't realize what it actually takes to get there. And so by giving, we call it like with the GLP-1, we think GLP-1s fit great in a holistic health picture when used as a tool, not a crutch, right? But we think of it as a Trojan horse for lifestyle improvement. Like, give someone something that works. And as that, I talk to our patients all the time, as that weight starts to come off, oh, my joints don't hurt as much. Oh, I have more energy to go back to yoga and bar, and I can play with my kids again, and I could do all these things. And that steamrolls in a positive direction for people. And so that's super encouraging to see. And then it's also, also when you're thinking about some of these tools, like, again, tools that work while giving and building a foundation of change for the other stuff of the diet and the exercise and things like that. So we're trying to approach that very smartly, but you have to meet people where they're at. And then when you also think about, in terms of prevention, if you think about medicine as there's a shift towards what's called medicine 3.0, or more diagnostics, screens, tons of comprehensive blood panels, all of that stuff is absolutely fantastic. But that's kind of more on the, fixing the foundation side of the spectrum, which you have to do, but you also kind of have to pair that with things that work in the meantime. And so figuring out how to do that from the business side is really interesting for us, because we don't do all the comprehensive blood panels and all that sort of like longevity, biologic age and stuff yet. We'll get there, but at the same time, like, we have to give people things that work at the same time too. So yeah, that's been an interesting dance to play with, of like when to roll out certain things to meet people where they're at. Because talking to these patients every day, people need solutions that work. And then we've been, you can kind of slip in all the other stuff, which is awesome to see.
It reminds me, there's that famous book, because we've touched on this in previous conversations, John Mark, about the interplay between mental health and physical health. And it reminds me of the famous book Psycho-Cybernetics. If you've read it.
I'm not familiar now.
It's basically Psycho-Cybernetics. The concept is basically sort of your internal thermostat as to who your identity is. And the interesting thing is, it's actually written by a plastic surgeon originally. And what he actually said was, people would come to him quite regularly saying, hey, my nose is oversized or whatever, I want to get rhinoplasty. And sometimes people get the nose job and they come out, they feel like a new person. But what was interesting was, very often they get the procedure and they would, and completely different appearance on an objective physical state, and they look at themselves in the mirror and say, my nose is still massive. Yeah. When in an objective reality, that was not the case. Everyone was like, you look entirely different.
Yeah.
And what would happen was, they would keep trying to look for these alterations, because in their mind, they identified as somebody with some sort of physical feature that they were not happy with. And the consensus in the book was, if you don't change your self-perception of who you are, in this case, with the work that you're doing with people that want to lose weight with Ozempic or similar peptides, it's just not going to work. So it's really a full identity shift, which is one thing I love about what you're doing. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Dude, that touches on a whole nother layer of health. I guess the way I see it is like, health is a foundation. If you're not healthy, that's all. It's like a person wants 1,000 things. A sick person just wants one, right? You just want to be healthy. If you can give people that layer, then you get to the next thing of like, oh, what is this existence? And then there's all these questions of like, oh, am I happy, and purpose, and all these other things, which is like the next layer of things that we all struggle with. But mindset is so tied to physical health. Just the way you feel, clarity, cognition, all of that stuff is so tied to physical health. We're approaching that from like, if we could help people get physical health, the mindset will improve. But that's an iterative process too, because your mind is super powerful as well, and that's going to influence your process for physical health as well. But that whole so you get super healthy, and then what? You still have to exist, right?
Yeah, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But again, the point that I'm making is, it's not binary. It's not one or the other. It's not.
Yes.
You sort your head out, then you get your mind right. Like, there's no reason you both of them in parallel, and that's 100%. That's what I agree with a lot of people on. But I think you can attack both simultaneoly, and they balance each other out. But bring it back to the peptides itself. Okay, so I've heard you say, for the record as well, we can discuss this, which this is not advice. This is your personal anecdotal experience. You have, I've heard you say, you have a higher risk tolerance than some when it comes to trying different peptides, and you've worked a lot. Which are, in your personal experience, which ones have you seen impact from, and what sort of effect have they had?
Good question. And I'll preface this with, I'm not a doctor. I am a bro. It's like interesting, because we're all making sense of what's truth out there, and there's so much information on the internet, and there's so many experts and doctors, and you could literally find two sides of the same coin in the same hour on social media or the internet. So it is really challenging to figure out what's real out there. And so my approach there has been, well, I'm not an idiot. Like, I'm not a doctor, but I'm not an idiot. I have an engineering mind. I'm good at math. I can figure some of this, I can make logical decisions. So I like to just look at what certain experts are saying. I like to digest a lot of information out there. And then I do like to try things myself, and I'll talk to people that have done it. And life's a pretty big experiment, right? So why not try a few things? If you believe in it and you have reasonable confidence in something, why not try it out? That's why I tried stem cells. I was hearing so much about them. My dad had a really great experience with his sciatica and nerve pain with stem cells. I had some sort of personal friends that had good experience. I heard some people on podcasts, XYZ. And I was like, okay, this is something that I want to try out. And so with peptides as well, I like to digest all the information. There's a few doctors there's actually not a ton of peptide experts out there. And so that's another opportunity as well for people that truly understand the science of this to be a leader in the education space. So I've started trying things out, and based off what I personally tried and then what sort of the commonly accepted, best peptides out there, we have like our stack for what we like to recommend for levers and what we think are some of the best. So personal favorites and ones that I would recommend for most people, not medical advice, but so one's called BPC 157. It's awesome. I'm like hearing about it in little like clips and memes online at this point, which is just showing you that it's going mainstream a little bit. BPC 157 is primarily used for a repair and recovery protocol for soft tissue, so like ligaments, muscles, and tendons. It encourages angiogenesis, which is the formation of new blood vessels, and then encouraging the new blood vessels brings more blood flow to the area and just brings more healing to that as well. It also encourages cell proliferation. So if you're repairing something, that's good. So it's really popular for an injury recovery profile. I've used it personally for inflammation in my shoulder, in my hip. I've had a lot of friends use this to speed up recovery from an Achilles tear or like kind of acute type injuries. And then it's also really popular and used for gut health and repair of the gut lining. It's supposed to support the endothelial cells of blood vessels. And then also, I believe it's the lining of, I don't know, don't quote me on that one, but there's kind of certain things within the gut that's really supposed to help, like healing of ulcers is one common use case for it. And people have used it for, assisting with the treatment of Crohn's disease and sort of like GI related issues. BPC 157 is a cool one because it can also be taken orally. And that's one note about peptides. When we were talking about peptides earlier, peptide bonds are fairly weak. And so when you ingest them orally, they tend to break down super fast in the stomach acid. So that's why most of them are injected because they just don't break down as fast. BPC 157 can be taken orally. And for a gut health protocol, it's actually recommended to take orally, which is a lot easier for people than injecting themselves with a needle. So that one's super cool. That's like a top 3 peptide, if not a top 1.
Yeah, the green peptide.
What's that?
Wolverine peptide.
The Wolverine peptide. Yeah, I hate that name, but yeah, totally.
It was from you that I heard it. So.
Yeah, I don't know if that name is like doing the peptide community any good.
Probably
but,
not. Obviously in the state that Hugh Jackman's in.
Yeah, right. Other great peptides that I personally like. So there's one called thymosin alpha 1, which is naturally derived from the thymus gland. It's synthetically produced, but it was extracted, isolated from the thymus gland. That is a really powerful immune modulator. It was FDA approved. I think it still is under the brand name Zadaxin for treatment of hepatitis B and as an adjunct to chemotherapy. So like pretty gnarly immune system diseases and things that need immune system regulation, people would dose with thymosin alpha 1. And that one was really cool. In phase, I think it was in phase 3 trials with 2,500 people, there was not one single adverse reaction, which is pretty remarkable for a peptide. Also, the fact that it's naturally occurring. So again, you're supplementing with something that you already have to give yourself an extra boost. One use case. So I take thymosin alpha 1 if I feel like I'm getting sick or if I'm just kind of going through a period of immune stress. There was a lot of controversy around it during COVID times because some doctors were using it for COVID And then the FDA came down and was like, you can't say that. And basically like shut it all down. So there's like one camp of people that were super mad because they're like, this is working, and you're taking it away from us. And then there's, the sort of the establishment that's like, no, you gotta follow the playbook. And you both sides have their points. But thymosin alpha 1 is really cool. We don't use it for this specifically, but a lot of doctors use this for mold toxicity as well, and supporting getting rid of mold toxicity. But it's just a really powerful immune modulator. So that one's great. Thymosin beta 4 is also extracted from the thymus gland. I'm not as educated on thymosin beta 4, but it's overall another healing peptide for both inflammation, just sort of like systemic inflammation, which is related to every disease state ever, and tissue injuries as well. So if people are doing like a tissue injury recovery protocol, oftentimes they'll do BPC 157 plus thymosin beta 4. There's so many numbers here. Thymosin beta 4 is a long peptide. It's actually, I think it's 43 amino acids long. So technically it's a protein. And so it's like harder to get. There's a fragment of thymosin beta 4 called TB500 that it's supposed to be more of the injury recovery and tissue healing benefits of thymosin beta 4. And so people will use that. They'll do TB500 plus BPC for an injury recovery stack. And then if they really want to like put the gas on, they'll do a growth hormone supporting peptide as well. And that's probably like one of my other favorites is a combination of growth hormone supporting peptides. So we really like at Levers, we really like the combination of two peptides, which is ipamorelin. And then the second one is CJC 1295. And that combination, one is a growth hormone releasing hormone, and the other is a growth hormone releasing peptide. And they act on basically via two different pathways on the pituitary to secrete that growth hormone more in line with your natural rhythms. And that has, again, it's impacting your sleep, your recovery, a number of things. What's cool about using the growth hormone supporting peptides with BPC is that BPC increases the number of growth hormone receptors found on your cells. So when you're taking BPC, it's a pretty synergistic effect. So if you're taking BPC without the growth hormone stuff, you're going to make more use of whatever growth hormone you have anyways. And then if you take them together, it's kind of like that's a really nice sweet spot. So like it
helps offset saturation. Is that effectively it?
Say again?
It helps offset saturation or tolerance being built up effectively, is it?
I think that could be correct to say. And again, those two growth hormone, and the other reason we like those two peptides for the growth hormone support is that they have a much lower risk of saturating the receptors. There's certain growth hormone peptides out there like MK677, which is called ibutamoren, and then tesamorelin, which are stronger than CJC 1295 and ipamorelin, but they have a higher risk of saturating those receptors. And so from a risk tolerance thing, like I'd rather get a little bit lower result and be safe. Because again, most of this is pretty experimental.
Further
So all that stuff's great. TA1, basically thymosin alpha 1 for immune stuff. The growth hormone, love the CJC ipamorelin. BPC 157 is like something that like one of the peptide expert doctors, his name's Dr. William Seeds. He's like the peptide doctor. He's a really great follow. He's super educational. He really knows the science of this stuff. And he's saying it's like, man, they should put this stuff in the water. BPC 157 also naturally derived from your gastric juice. So it's a fragment of something that's already found in your body. It's, again, all peptides are synthetically produced, but they are oftentimes bioidentical. Not all, but many of them are. And so BPC 157, I think, is like the one that pretty much everyone can take. The one is, I would say it's also important to note, like, everyone in the peptide community is all like, peptides, good. There's nothing bad about these. There's no adverse events, right? Well, we just don't know. So that's the other thing is like, what are the risks and how you should be thinking about this? One criticism of BPC 157 specifically is that it encourages cell proliferation. And if you're encouraging cell proliferation, that could cause cancers to grow or existing cancers to spread. Now, if you like that's kind of the traditional criticism for BPC 157. I don't know enough about the science to refute that, but I do know that a lot of the peptide experts have, and I've listened to them try and explain why that's not the case and why they give it to their cancer patients and why they still see success. I just don't know enough about it to refute the fact that encouraging cell proliferation could be pro-cancerous. And so, like, we're not going to recommend that to anyone that has a history of cancer or anything like that, just because there is, we want to approach this smart. And again, this is a fairly low regulated space, and these drugs haven't been through all the trials, and so you just have to approach this smart. So it's and even with the growth hormone, it's like, well, what's the downside of growth hormone? Well, one criticism could be, so it impacts stage 4 sleep. It increases stage 4 sleep. So if your stage 4 sleep is going up and you're sleeping the same amount of hours per night, what's going down? Is it your REM sleep? It could be. And so that's another thing is, thinking about this holistically of like, okay, what are all the considerations here? There seem to be super high tolerance for most peptides. There's very low side effects. Like, commonly known side effects is almost zero for most of these peptides, but there are cautions that need to be taken. There are things that need to be screened for. People should be doing blood work. You should be looking for certain things, like with the growth hormone ones, you should be testing your IGF-1 levels, make sure they're not elevated super high. One criticism of the growth hormone ones is it can also transiently increase your blood sugar. And again, I've heard peptide experts kind of explain why that's not that big of a deal, and it's just transient and all these things. But I don't have enough data as a bro to refute some of that, so I'm going to have to play it a little bit safe.
Okay, so again, for the record, you've said it several times. Obviously, this is your personal experience with this. Obviously, as the founder of Levers Health, needless to say, I need to make any decisions, do the due diligence. The main point that you want to state is, amongst everything else, so people can re-listen. One example is obviously some peptides may encourage cell proliferation, and obviously anything that encourages cell growth may potentially have the potential to bring cancer of some sort. So do your research, but
and work with a doctor.
Yes, with everything. So if you're a doctor, do due diligence, I'm sure you would, but if not, work with one. So that actually circles back to an important point I want to bring up. I know from personal experience, there, working with people and so on, it's an interesting space to be in, the whole peptide space, with a lot of changes going on right now with the FDA, a lot of regulations, legalities. What is the current landscape looking like, in terms of selling peptides and peptide treatment in general,
Yeah, good question. So it is constantly shifting. So there were some changes in October, November, where, and largely this is driven by the increase in popularity and use of peptides. So you have thousands of doctors. They're part of the International Peptide Society. They're using them smartly, but there's way more people using peptides. And then you also have research chemical companies online, which are unregulated peptides, which haven't really been tested for safety and purity and removing the contaminants, which is super important. So the FDA put the brakes on everything. Possibly they were pressured by some industry. That's kind of the thought. But they added most peptides to a Category 2 list, which prevented compounding pharmacies from making and supplying these peptides, which is really unfortunate because compounding pharmacies, they get a lot of flack from Big Pharma and some of these other agencies because the criticism with compounding pharmacies is, well, they don't have the quality control standards. They don't have the sterility of a true manufacturing plant. And that's a whole rabbit hole that you could go down as well. But our thought is generally compounding pharmacies are providing safe medications. As long as you're working with a reputable one, they actually have really tight safety and quality control because they get so much pressure from the FDA and the big pharma companies that they have to have their ducks in a row. So the FDA said compounding pharmacies can no longer make these peptides on this list. That removed a lot of supply from the market for doctors. So doctors are saying, what's happening? I'm treating my patients with these peptides that I can no longer get. What am I going to do? Am I going to get them from unregulated sources? Am I going to find a new supplier? There's certain compounding pharmacies that are just operating in non-compliance right now. And they say, hey, we think we're in the clear. We think this is legal. This is BS. We're going to keep making these. And so there's that group of compounding pharmacies that's still alive. There's doctors that are looking for new sources. Our approach is we're going to do things by the book to the extent which it is defined. And again, it is still very gray, and you get differing opinions from different people and different lawyers because nobody really knows for a lot of this stuff. So you really have to approach this smartly. The current landscape is that you can't get it from a compounding pharmacy. So that's pushing people to compounding labs, which is separate than a pharmacy, or various other sources. Now, the compounding labs, again, it all comes down to sourcing and quality control and safety and purity. So it's like there's a machine called an HPLC, which it gives you like a spectrum analysis of exactly what's in every peptide. And so every batch of peptides should always be tested. You should be ensuring that your peptides are as pure as they say they are. You want them more than 99% pure. And you find a lot of this stuff on the internet. I get emails every day from suppliers in China. We have 99% pure. You test it, it's 95% pure. What's that extra 5%? That could be a lot of different things that are not safe to put in your body. And so it all goes back to sourcing and finding a reliable lab that has the certs, that has the data, that has that. And if doctors can feel qualified and sure about their sourcing, there's no real issue with doctors prescribing something that's not approved by the FDA. There's plenty of provisions for basically prescribing other things. And so the risk to the prescriber, they need to make sure that their source is good and that they're educating their patients, that they're telling them that they're not like lying. You can't say that this is like FDA approved or anything like that, because it's not. You have to educate people. You have to do what's called informed consent that says, look, this is a more experimental type of therapy. We think it might be good for XYZ. We don't have all the data, but this is what we think. And if you want to, you could participate in with us. So that's kind of how in terms of people doing this by the book, it seems to be moving towards a more informed consent model, with people moving to compounding labs versus compounding pharmacies. There are still some compounding pharmacies that are making them, but who knows how long that's going to last. And honestly, so this is going to do two things. It's going to push a lot more people to gray market sources, which is bad. But then for the people that are trying to do this right, it's going to push people in the direction of actually doing some studies and actually doing this right. And so that can actually be good. We're actually looking at commissioning what's called an IRB, the International Review Board research study, where it's like, okay, if you use a research chemical peptide and you actually do a research study, then like that's the right path on how to do this. And we're working with a company that's doing most of the legwork on that. But that's a pretty exciting thing of like, okay, how can we do this by the book and actually get real data from hundreds to thousands of people on some of this stuff? So that's kind of where the legal landscape is. It's changing super fast. And I think that's one thing with telehealth is and kind of this regenerative medicine space as a whole, is you need to be really flexible with that landscape, and you have to approach it with safety, trust, and compliance to the extent but also at the same time, we know we believe in this stuff. And so we want to find ways to legally and safely get this to our patients.
And then what is the current breakdown, I suppose, of, again, if you don't know, obviously with whatever information you're comfortable sharing, the difference between, number one, doctors prescribing peptides. So you're saying FDA not approved, they can make a decision to provide patients with information, and there's a whole informed consent route. As I understand, compounding pharmacies are not allowed, compounding labs are. A bit of clarity there would be appreciated. But what about, say, e-commerce stores, or where is the line between doctors prescribing something and selling it online / telehealth?
We're trying to figure that out.
Good question. Come back to me.
That's going to be our sauce. So most doctors, from my understanding, are not prescribing peptides. They are now recommending peptides, which is an interesting gray area because most injectables are classified as drugs, not supplements. And so there's a few different sort of discrepancies and like legal nuances that need to be solved there. But you have a lot of doctors that are moving to an informed consent model that are recommending peptides now rather than prescribing them. And when you're recommending them, if it's not prescribed, when it's prescribed, it has to come from a vetted manufacturer or a 503A or 503B certified pharmacy. If you're recommending them, it's a little looser. And then it comes down to, well, where are you getting it and how do you trust it? And you're basically, these doctors, it's your medical license on the line if someone comes after you, right? So I think the medical community is still figuring that out. And then as an e-commerce platform, that's something to navigate with really, really smartly as well, because there's a lot of rules around what you can and can't say. There's a lot, if you do well, you're drawing a lot of attention to the fact that you're providing these to people, which again, we believe in them, but we have to approach that smartly. So we're still navigating that ourselves. I mean, since November, when the FDA made those rule changes, we've pulled all of those peptides off our site. And we've been working with our lawyers, we've been working with our sources, we've been working with all of the things to bring this back legally and safely. And we're really close to getting that back out there. But how we present that information to the world on the internet is an open question, because you want to show people and give them education and access to this stuff, but you also can't make any claims that aren't true. And so that's something we're still navigating. But it's exciting. There's there's opportunity there as well, because whoever can figure this out is going to be able to help a lot of people. Versus, again, like just buying chemicals online, which is like the other, not the recommended path.
Yeah. In the record, explicitly saying that's probably not a wise idea. So bringing it back to Lever's Health, then what exactly is the business model that you guys are implementing? So obviously, at the end of the day, I want people to be informed from a business standpoint. How are you guys going about navigating all of this right now, and where do you fit in this space?
Yeah, good question. So we are building a customer service platform. Telehealth is a service business. Medicine is a service business at the end of the day. And as more people transition to an online service model and finding more education and trustworthy information out there, if they can trust it, and meeting with their doctors or over the internet and all that stuff, a lot of business is moving online. But medicine is still a very personal experience. And so people need to feel like they can trust the company. They need to have excellent service, communication, all of that stuff needs to be tightly wound up. And so the way I see Levers going is that we are a telehealth service platform that provides medications and protocols that work. They meet them on that end of the spectrum of where they are now, while we build the education and we build in the other support and give people the stuff to fix the root of the problem as well. We're really trying to approach it from both angles. Peptides is something that, if we can figure out legally and safely, fits very nicely into that these things work. And a lot of peptides do help address some root problems. But we'll continue to add in other protocols, except, normal ones like glutathione and NAD and all these other, the blood tests and all that stuff. That'll all be part of the comprehensive picture. Peptides, we think, fit into that. We like to think of ourselves like kind of between the fully allopathic and the fully naturopathic. We're probably somewhere in the middle. We like to take the best of both and take a pretty holistic approach. And we think that fits in with consumer behavior and where it's headed, of taking a more personalized approach to medicine and having more ownership of their health, both in terms of what they have access to and then what they are exposed to. And so we think peptides are a great wedge. They're exciting. They work. If we can figure them out, that's great. We think we have some good headway there. But we will continue to add in other products. And really, we just focus on service and trust. Those are the two things that we're looking to build. At the end of the day, it's a service business. You got to talk to people. You got to make them feel supported. It's a very personalized thing. Everyone is showing up with their own condition, their own blood work, all that stuff. So you really need to treat people with a high touch approach. And we'll use all the tools that can help us with that and deliver that with a lower overhead, that we can deliver a better price to our patients, right? So we'll use AI tools. We'll use as much as we can to deliver that service with the highest quality at a fair price. But really, it's just for us, it's a focus on service and protocols that work.
Yeah, I've heard you say before that basically all business is customer service. I think that's a great point, and what you're doing with Levers Health really embodies that. And again, I want to be respectful for your time, but I have two sort of follow-up questions here. Number one, I've heard you make the comparison before with, wanting Levers Health to be to Peptides what Coinbase is crypto. What's the philosophy there? And then also, what's the second question? Oh yeah, you're talking about education, obviously, and empowering people, which is something I'm massively an advocate of. Again, a previous guest of mine, Ken Mitchell, made the point: if you look after the patients, the money will look after itself. I said that all starts with education. So that's something you're doing an amazing job with, John Mark. But yeah, I suppose the philosophy that where's the inspiration from Coinbase place, and then what are your thoughts on the role of education in the future of Levers Health?
Good question. I mean, Coinbase is just a sick company, so it's a very lofty goal to be like them, right? And it is a totally different space. But the reason I made that analogy is because they went about it. They didn't cut corners. They pushed for regulation. They wanted to do things right. They wanted to bring something that they believed in to more people in an unregulated gray area space. And there was a lot of people cutting corners. There's a lot of people that lost their money on marketplaces that failed and did things not correctly, that Coinbase approached with integrity. And so that bleeds into the next thing. That's if you take care of the customers, the business will take care of itself, right? So if you lead with integrity, maybe that means going slower. Maybe that means not launching certain products or saying certain things. That's fine. But I think if we approach this smartly, if we follow the rules, if we don't break the law, we build that trust and we can get people things that work. And so that's my philosophy there. I don't think we're the next Coinbase. Like I said, we are a digital services business for health. And we start with the customer experience. That's the one thing we're doing fantastic on. We get a ton of referrals. Our patients love us. We have a pretty high touch approach. We have pretty low overhead, but a high touch approach with our patients. And that service, I think, will translate into future success of the business. And we'll layer in some of the other protocols. Again, it'll be some mix of all the commonly accepted stuff, but we're also really excited about other things like exosomes and other things that are newer and are less defined and less regulated. So again, approaching that with integrity, doing it correctly, not breaking the law, doing the right blood work, doing all that stuff to keep it safe is going to be really important for us moving forward. And then just focusing on customer service. I think at the end of the day, people are searching for this stuff, right? People want NAD, people want glutathione, people want GLP-1s, they want peptides, they want BPC. We only operate in Arizona right now. I have all my friends in California like, dude, like, when can we get this stuff? And I'm like, working on it, the demand seems to be there. We just got to approach it super smart.
Brilliant. I was going to ask you, the last question for wrap things up is, what do you see the future of the space being? What, in terms of biggest challenges and opportunities? You've talked about, this was actually, side note, how are you set for time?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good.
Good. What do you see being the biggest opportunities in the space? And you talked about exosomes, you played around with stem cells from personal experience. What are the biggest trends that you see being coming up over the next few years in regenerative medicine in general?
Sorry, I just had to text my team. Biggest trends in regenerative medicine. I'm not a genie. I'm just kind of like sticking my finger in the wind and kind of going with that. I'm in the space. I have a lot of biohacker friends. This is great. There's so many exciting things. It's like, where do you focus your attention on? I think macro, you want to skate to where the puck is headed, right? You want to be you kind of want to be on that early adopter wave because eventually this becomes more mainstream. One of our theses is that GLP-1s, as contentious as they are completely here to stay. They are causing more good than harm. The benefits associated with being at a healthy weight from a GLP and assisted by a GLP, layering in all those other things, far outweigh the side effects and risks. So those are going to continue to expand. There's a new one coming out late this year called retatrutide, which is like the dopest one yet. They're finding new, they're looking at it for Alzheimer's prevention. They're looking at it for PCOS. They're looking at it for all sorts of things. One patient last night told me that she got her smell back after long COVID, after being on a GLP-1 for a couple months. Like, wow, she's lost like 30 pounds. And she's like, I really do think it's the medicine. As I've increased the dose, my smell has come back more and more. So there's really exciting things there. We're not just a weight loss company though. Like the regenerative medicine space, I think exosomes are super exciting. I also think there's a macro shift towards personalized health and metrics and biomarkers and things like that. So again, shifting towards prevention. All of this is cash pay model at this point too. So the other sort of thesis is the company is we're not going to reinvent the wheel on certain things that are going to take so much time to fix. So like the insurance model and getting insurance to reimburse some of these things, like we're not going to touch that yet because we know it's not there yet. Eventually, hopefully it will be there, but we're just going to move cash pay model for now because we can do more of these preventative therapies and deliver that at a lower cost. So I think diagnostics and screening is super cool. Like the blood panels, the yearly or every 6-month blood panels, what does that tell you about your body? And then what insights can you glean from that? You can create, I don't want to use the like AI buzzword because I don't know how AI works, but like you could use tools and smart people that know how to use tools to complete a picture of someone, basically a digital representation of all their data, their lifestyle habits, all of these things can like fit into a comprehensive picture that you could then use to recommend things to people. I think one other thing with medicine and where it's headed is we are inundated with options and data out there. Like if I have a budget of $500 a month to spend on my health or something, like I don't like, how am I supposed to know what's going to be the most bang for my buck? Should I go do peptides? Should I go do IV drips? Should I go do gene therapy, stem cells? Like, I don't know. Like there's so much stuff out there that helping people parse through what's actually good for them based off their genetics, based off their blood work, based off their lifestyle factors and all those things. I think if you can help match people with that data or sort of match people with those therapies, I think that's where medicine's headed. It's super personalized. And AI, computers, all of this stuff is going to just help smart people, smart doctors who know this stuff. Not me. This is like, right? It's going to help the smart people do more and help more people, which is going to bring that as more access to everyone. It's going to lower the cost, and it's going to that price is going to come down where you can have more personalized medicine that's a little bit more shifted towards prevention, which can hopefully prevent a lot of these disease states that we're seeing in the future. There's a ton of behavior change and education that needs to happen too. And like I said, there's a lot of broken things. There's a lot of problems to solve in the world. Like the pharmaceutical industry, there's a lot of problems with that. All we're doing is like throwing drugs at the problems without actually fixing the source, right? And the food industry, it's like there's a lot of things we need to address in terms of the food environment. But I think I think people are approaching that from both angles. And I think for medicine, it's headed much more personalized. And I think small companies or companies that are very service focused have an opportunity to bring that to people. We don't have some like super big vision yet. And I always I'm jealous of my friends that are like, we're going to change the world. We're going to do this. I'm like, well, we sell things that work and we treat our patients really well. And like, hopefully that works out for us. But we don't have this like master plan. We're working on that.
Amazon was a bookstore, so I wouldn't be too concerned.
Fair.
So you can always start so with a narrow scope, and I was broadened from there. But listen, so I say this has been amazing. I've actually learned a lot, and I'm going to try and remember all the numbers after BPC 157 and all those and everything else. But with that being said, John Mark, where can people find you?
Good question. We've been so focused on building a business. We don't have we have one post on Instagram. We don't have any social media presence. Our website's kind of crap. Best way to find me is probably on Instagram, at levers.health, or my personal at John Mark Pero, JohnMarkPero. That's probably the best for now. We want to start putting out more content out there, and we need more help. We keep hiring. That will come as we grow. but a lot on the education. Honestly, I think our Instagram side, most of our patients are a bit older too. So Instagram more so than TikTok. We'll start putting out more education out there. So at Levers Health, levers.health is good. You could always reach out. You could book a free call on our website if you're interested about peptides or anything like that. Like I said, we only serve Arizona for now. Yeah, I'm also like, I think the partnership model is really cool. Like, I don't really see competitors as competitors. We're all in this together. We're all pushing medicine forward. I have a ton of friends in medicine. They're all doing awesome stuff. So people that just want to like collaborate, chop up ideas, we're always super into that. And we know that we can't do this alone. So would love to talk if you're interested.
Brilliant. With that being said, John Mark, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm looking forward to doing this again.
Tomas, great to do this, man. Super fun. Thanks for having me on. It's been great.